Hi, everyone. Welcome to Happy to See Me, the podcast that puts the spotlight on the overlooked and underestimated. I'm Erika Casupanan, and this week I am speaking with Kayla and Bethany of the Stanning BTS podcast about the overlooked and sometimes misunderstood parts about being in a fandom. But first, I love to start each episode talking about something I was happy to see this week. And this week, I am excited about the imminent return of Jin from BTS from the military. So what does this mean? BTS, as citizens of South Korea, are required to partake in mandatory military service. So over the last 18 months, the members of BTS have been enlisting in the military, and Jin is the first member to be completing his military service. Jin also happens to be my favorite member of BTS. So my BTS fan heart, aka my ARMY heart, is bursting because I'm so excited for him to be back. I am in my excited era. I know that I'm going to be a different person. I'm going to be over the moon this summer. So that is what I am happy to see this week. And of course, I needed to commemorate this moment with this week's interview. So it is my pleasure to have on the podcast Bethany and Kayla from the Stanning BTS podcast. The Stanning BTS podcast features these two ARMY best friends as they talk about everything and anything related to the global pop sensation BTS. I was really lucky that I was actually a guest on Stanning BTS a few months ago where I could talk about how BTS and their underdog story inspired me. I will make sure to link that episode in the show notes because truly it's one of my favorite interviews I've done and I got to be so vulnerable in it. So I highly recommend you check it out. In this week's episode, Kayla, Bethany, and I talk about the often misunderstood parts of being in a fandom. How does one get into a super fandom and what does it mean? Plus, we talk about the unexpected, amazing benefits that come from being a super fan of something. If you know any BTS fans, aka ARMY, make sure you share this episode with them. So let's just get into it. Here is my interview with Kayla and Bethany of Stanning BTS. I hope you enjoy it. Bethany and Kayla, I feel like we have the band back together. I'm so happy to be speaking to you both again.
Well, thank you for having us. This is great to be on your show.
Yes, anyone listening, if they haven't heard, I was on Stanning BTS a few months ago. Bethany and Kayla interviewed me, and honestly, it was one of my favorite interviews that I've ever done.
It's so sweet for you to say that. We loved having you, and it was such a great time. So we're excited to be here again tonight on your podcast.
Thank you. And can I say, your listeners are so sweet. I mean, the listeners to this podcast are sweet too, okay? I love everybody who's listening. But your listeners are so sweet. For one, when I told some of my BTS friends and my ARMY friends in person that I was a guest on your show, they were like, oh my God, I listened to that podcast. I can't wait to hear you on it. So I've met some real life fans of yours. And then I did get some really sweet DMs from some of your listeners after I was on the show talking about how they enjoyed the conversation we had. So thank you. And then thank you for introducing me to your community. It was amazing.
We love the iconic ARMY, as we call them. They're really wonderful people. I feel like ARMY in general are really great people. And then we have this small subset of ARMY who listen to the show. And it's just, they're overwhelmingly just so supportive and great people.
Yes. And I love that as an ARMY, it's kind of our shared experience that we know that there's almost like a built-in trust. When you know someone else is an ARMY, you're like, at the very least, they are a good person. I feel like over the last little while, I don't want to say the ARMY has been dormant, but we got a bit of a break. BTS has been in the military. We got a bit of a break. I feel like I've been able to have a little break because I know once everybody is out of the military, then all bets are off. We go back into full ARMY mode. But for my friends who are not necessarily ARMY, they don't really understand why it's a big deal that BTS is in the military. So can you explain what it means to have BTS all doing their military service right now?
Yeah, so South Korea has mandatory conscription. So every man from, between the age of 18 and 30, he has to spend 2 years in the military. Because of this, BTS at some point had to serve their time. There was a lot of conversation before they went in about, will BTS maybe not have to serve because they such a big group and whatever. But there's never been a time where idols did not serve. So BTS followed suit and they said, we're going to serve our country. They're proud to do it. They're happy to do it. But we have just been, ever since they started going in, we've been waiting for them.
Yes. And this week, so when this episode comes out, Jin, who is my bias in BTS. And for anyone listening and they're not aware of what a bias is, so in K-pop, you don't have a favorite in a group because you love all of the group members, but your bias is the one who you just bias a bit more. It's the one that you're drawn to. So Jin from BTS is my bias, and he is about to finish his military service. So why is it a big deal that Jin is going to be out in a few days?
It's a big deal because, he's the first one to come out of service here. So, he's been gone. It feels like forever. Like, we got the astronaut from him before he went in. It's kind of making it a little bit more real for us that they are going to start be trickling back in, and coming back together. I think what we're most excited about is Jin is kind of one of those more unpredictable members that you don't know what he's going to do. We've talked a lot with other armies of what we could maybe expect from him when he comes back. There's been people who talked about maybe the astronaut will be put on an album. Some people think that he might be on a variety show because he's such a character. I am really looking forward to the live that he does. He talked about he's going to go on Weverse Live. I think that Weverse is going to crash. Every army around the world is just going to be tuning in for that. And who knows what he's going to do.
I can't wait for it. As an army, I feel like as we look back to, 18 months ago now, which is wild that Jin has been gone for 18 months. But when you look back to where we were 18 months ago, it was kind of a challenging time to be an army because there was so much speculation about whether or not they're going to enlist in the military, when they're going to go, are they all going to be gone at the same time? So I think that there was so much that we had to be worried about as a fandom. And then now I think it's more celebratory. They're coming back. We're going to get a chaotic live on Weverse. We've turned the corner where it's now going to be so fun. Not that it wasn't fun being a BTS fan, but now it's going to be so much more fun. Do you feel the same way?
Oh, yeah. We're really excited about it. We talked about having a party or a celebration for him coming back. I don't know what to expect fully when they're all coming back together. I think it's going to look pretty different from maybe the BTS we've seen in the past. They keep saying chapter 1, chapter 2 is where we are with the solo albums. And then now I feel like it's going to be chapter 3. I'm just excited to see what they do and where they go from here.
Yes, totally agree. It's so fun to be part of this collective and this community and this fandom. And I do want to talk to you both today about being in a fandom, because I think that sometimes people can be judgmental of people who consider themselves super fans of something, but then we met through being super fans of something. So there is a lot of good to be had. So first, do you consider yourselves to be super fans of BTS? And how would you define being a super fan of something?
I would say that I'm a super fan of BTS just because they've taken over my whole life since 2017, I think that being a super fan is a really amazing connection that you get to have with other people that also are that attuned to that topic or that fandom. So it's just something, it's an experience that you really don't get unless you're a part of it. I would say it's not like I'm buying every single merch product that I can get, but I've supported BTS through all of their different endeavors. I love and enjoy their music. I talk to every single person I know about them, so I would definitely consider myself a super fan because of those reasons.
I would say I'm a super fan too. I think having a podcast about BTS alone, it kind of puts me in that category of being a super fan. I think it's just kind of like the links you'll go for the group, whether you're really into merch and buying merch or making sure you buy their albums or keeping up with just recent news around BTS. I think that kind of puts you in the category as more of a super fan. I think for Kayla and I, the number one thing that we're willing to drop a lot of money and do whatever for is going to a concert. Absolutely.
Yes. Yeah, it's one of those things. If I speak to another army or even another K-pop fan, they understand. But then when I talk to people who are not K-pop fans and I'm like, oh yeah, anytime that BTS is in North America, I will just stop everything I'm doing and drop any amount of money to go see them. I see you both nodding your heads. It's like, no question. Of course, that's what you're going to do.
Yeah, that's what happened with us when their Map of the Soul tour ended up getting canceled because of COVID. And then they announced that people who had tickets before got first dibs at their concert that was going to be in LA. Kayla and I have never talked about going to LA together. And I called her up and it's just like, yeah, we're going to LA. I guess we're going with no questions asked, and our husbands were like, do it. They know.
Oh, I know. And even now, knowing that they're coming back and that some of them have been releasing albums in the time that they've been at the military, in my mind, I'm like, that's more material. They could tour. So I'm like, okay, I'm not going to plan big trips for the rest of the year because who knows? Who knows what's going to happen? Mm-hmm. But that's just in this specific fandom, I think that that's the way that we're kind of wired. Were you both always into being fandoms or into being super fans of things before BTS?
I've always been a music fan. This is kind of strange, but when I was like in middle school and high school, I got really into the Beatles. Super like not in my time frame, but I would say like I kind of became like a super fan of them in like terms of like loving their music and looking at their lyrics and stuff. And so I would say that's like a little bit of a fandom that I was in. I would have totally been like Beatles mania if I was living in the 60s. Other than that, I feel like I've kind of been around other fandoms, but not quite like I am with BTS. Like I'm fully immersed in BTS and being a part of ARMY.
Yeah, I would say I'm pretty similar. I was not a part of any big music fandoms growing up. Bethany is the one who really got me into BTS, so that was like my first foray into music fandom. I'm sure like book fandoms like Twilight or Harry Potter or something growing up, I was of course involved in, but not on the level of BTS. When I found out about them, everything was totally different and I became part of the community in a much different way.
Yeah, it's so interesting how our interactions with this fandom are so different from perhaps other fandoms. I used to be a huge fan of Survivor. Obviously, I'm still a fan of Survivor now, but then I got the opportunity to be such a fan for all of my life and then to actually play the game and be part of it. I know that even though basically any dream can come true, it's very unlikely I'm going to become the 8th member of BTS. So I can't be going towards this fandom in the same way. And obviously that's not what I want. But I feel like I also get to interact with the fandom in a different way and be part of the community and call myself an ARMY. So it's been fun that I can be part of this fandom without any real expectations. How did both of you discover BTS and what was it that drew you to them?
I discovered BTS because I was living with my sister at the time. And my sister, she's a music therapist. And she had a client at the time who was really into K-pop. And so she's like, I need to learn K-pop music. And so I said, oh, well, I have like this one friend that has mentioned something about a group named BTS. I'm like, maybe that would be a good place to start. And so her and I watched the Dope music video together. And I don't know what it was, but I first loved the song, but I was very drawn into them. I thought, this is so different, and I'm just curious. I want to know their names and who is who. And then it became just like, this is like the ARMY story here of once you figure out who is who, what their names are, then you start to learn about their personalities. Then you get into more of their music. And truthfully, I feel like their personalities is a big part of it. And just like how they interact with each other and all the like additional content you get of the members hanging out together and just, you know, just the brotherly love that they have for one another. It's just something I had never seen before. And so I was in love. Like I was like, I just want to consume BTS content 24/7. And so Kayla and I hung out one day.
This was like different too because it had been like 2 weeks since we had hung out.
Yeah, we hadn't hung out in a while.
We're already best friends at the time, and we hadn't seen each other just because of like school and life, whatever. Hadn't hung out, and then she comes to me and she's like, so I have a new obsession. Just like the way that she was talking about them, you know, their personalities, their music, everything. I had never, ever consumed any K-pop before, but I was like, all right, well, let's watch, let's listen, let's figure it out. And she had come over to my apartment and we watched the Dope music video since that was the first thing that she watched with her sister. She was like, this is it. This is who they are. And from then, I feel like the rest of the day, we were just listening to their music.
Yeah. And Erika, I very much knew like what a bias was at the time. So I was pressuring Kayla. I'm like, do you have a bias? Is anyone sticking out to you? I was like so curious to know who her bias was.
I know it's so automatic to think of a bias now. I find that anytime I put on a K-pop music video and someone who's not a K-pop fan is there, I'm like, okay, just choose. It can't be that hard. Which one do you like?
Who sticks out?
Exactly. Yeah. My older brother is really into Marvel and he's really into the X-Men. And I was like, who's your Marvel bias? And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, oh, I forgot. Not everyone talks like this.
Yeah.
Well, you both have been part of other fandoms. So I know, Bethany, you said you were a Beatles fan. And Kayla, you were into book franchises. So you've been fans of something. What is it about your appreciation for BTS that is a bit different than other fandoms you've been part of?
For me, I think it's the connection to the rest of ARMY and the community that you get along with being a fan of BTS. There's really nothing like ARMY that I had ever experienced.
I think the community with ARMY is a connection that I have that obviously I wasn't like the Beatles were not in my times, you know, really. But not only the connection with ARMY, but I feel that with BTS in general, this kind of like in K-pop, they talk a lot about like the parasocial relationship where there's just more content of the members. And so you feel like you get to know them, a little bit better. You watch their lives that they do. You see their behind the scenes. And so it's just, you feel a little bit more connected to them in that way. And I think that's really changed my involvement in the fandom. I just feel so much more closely connected to BTS and to the ARMY community.
People who are in it get it. As I said, I was a fan of Survivor before, but Survivor was something I really consumed in isolation. But through being an ARMY, unless you've been part of it, it's hard to explain, but I've genuinely made good friends from being an ARMY. And I've met people in the city and met people at concerts. And then when I see them again, it's just so easy to talk to them and to break the ice and to know that they're a kind person. There really is nothing like it. When it comes to people who are not ARMY, who find out that you are BTS super fans and you are podcasters, how do they react to that?
I get two different reactions usually. I would say probably one of the most common is people who don't know who BTS is, which I'm like, how do you not know who BTS is? Like, are you living under a rock? They're the biggest group in the world right now. But they have this kind of response of, oh, it's Korean, it's K-pop. I think one of the main follow-up questions is, how do you listen to their music when you don't know what they're saying? I think there's just like a lack of understanding a little bit. That can kind of be frustrating at times, or people are like, oh, it's a boy group. I'm 29. It's almost like there's an age limit on being in a fandom or liking a group that has men in it, when I'm like, they don't know that these 7 men are writing their own music. Their lyrics are very poetic and dense and have really great lyrical meaning. And that's a big part of why I love the group. But of course, you can't get into like all of that with them. But then I get another reaction too, where people are like, oh, I've heard of BTS, and then they're really curious, like, oh, you have a podcast about them? That's so cool. Or my sister is an ARMY, or one of my good friends loves BTS. They were in LA for their concert. Were you there? So it kind of goes two ways. It can be a little frustrating sometimes when you get the first response of, who is that? Oh, that's weird. They sing in Korean, That's kind of one of the responses you get.
And sometimes what's even funnier is that people are surprised how many people they know that knows BTS or that are ARMY. And so when they're like, oh, yeah, I think I've heard about them, Dynamite, right? Or Permission to Dance, right? And you're like, oh, yeah, you've definitely heard over the years. Like, I'm a teacher, and I've told a couple sets of students that I have this podcast because I'm really proud of our podcast. And I think that it's something that we have worked really, really hard on for, it's 6 years now. So I'll tell them it's kind of like a learning opportunity of, this is something that if you keep working hard, you can have these results and this payoff. They're like, oh, yeah, I know them. I know BTS. And they always are curious and asking more questions. I think that I come off so enthusiastic when I tell people about it that most people are not like, oh, what is that? Or, I don't get a lot of the negative responses very often. I think I'm a little bit lucky in that.
Okay, I'd love to hear that, because I think that sometimes people feel a bit almost bashful about things that they're super passionate about. Or I think that sometimes people can view somebody who is super into something, whether it's K-pop, whether it's anything, and see it as kind of nerdy. So it's really nice to see that with BTS, people for the most part have been open and curious to the interest that you both have in it. Do you find that there are usual misconceptions that people tend to have about K-pop fans or BTS fans?
There's so many. Like Bethany hinted at it earlier, like she's 29, okay? BTS fans are in their 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. There are fans of all ages, and we're not just young girls that are in middle school. This is a very full fandom of any age. Anyone is and can be ARMY and like appreciate BTS's music. And I think the other major misconception goes along with their music, which is that people think because they're K-pop, they don't write and produce their own music. They don't come up with their own concepts or talk about what they want to talk about, which is not true at all. That's like one of the big things that really drew us to BTS and like I think made us keep coming back for more album after album was that they just told their story, and we see them on the writing and the producing credits, and we see the behind the scenes of them making the music, and we know that they're real artists, real musicians, like really, really talented people. And I think people put them under their own mental umbrella and conception of what they think K-pop is. They don't think about BTS as individuals that are bringing their own talent to the table that deserves to be celebrated and followed.
I remember one day I just put BTS on shuffle. And I think that since their English songs were so popular in North America, people think that the English songs represent their full repertoire of music. But ARMYs know that even though we love the English songs, they don't even scratch the surface in terms of the music that BTS has. So I had put on BTS on shuffle, and then, of course, they cover so many genres. They cover rap, they cover all types of dance music, ballads, and every time a new song came on, someone would be like, is this still BTS? Oh, this is them. I'm like, yes, there's so much to it beyond just the few English songs you might have heard on the radio. So I always think if there is somebody who's interested in BTS, name whatever genre of music you're into. Truly, you can pick any genre. There are going to be song recommendations or even solo album recommendations where there's going to be something that you can be into. Is there something that you wish people better understood when it comes to being in a fandom and being an ARMY in particular?
I think something that I wish that people better understood is that, especially with being an ARMY and with BTS, is that we're not just crazy fanatic, screaming girls over how hot they are, which is sometimes a part of it,
We definitely do that. It's just not the whole thing.
In the right place at the right time, we will scream, okay?
I think that's where a lot of people go. And really, the fandom and the love for BTS is rooted much deeper than that. These songs have changed people's lives. I feel that there's so much appreciation and artistic love that we have for them too as musicians and songwriters. There's just so much more to the fandom and how we appreciate BTS than just screaming over their looks.
Which are great. Don't get me wrong.
Oh, no, they are.
I totally hear you. I think especially with a group like BTS and so much of their message is around self-love. The lyrics they write, and yes, they're written in Korean and we can look up the translation so we know what the songs are about. So many of the lyrics that they write do change people's lives. When I was on your podcast, I talked about how their music helped me develop self-compassion and develop confidence. And it's almost like some of these songs have been on a journey with me where they meant one thing at the time it came out, and then now it means something else. So it's really beyond just going crazy over these 7 men, but it's kind of how it affects your life too, beyond just the screaming moments.
Yeah, definitely. I love that you bring up their message of self-love that they had with their Love Myself era. But Kayla and I have talked a lot about, even with some of the solo work and the mixtapes, we'll be having a really bad day or someone kind of made me mad. And Kayla will be like, oh, go listen to August D's What Do You Think? And that'll just kind of help me get through it because I know what he's saying in that song, and it just kind of helps you cope with daily life stuff. They just seem to get it. Their lyrics, their messages, it just can really help you through a lot of different difficult moments in life.
Yeah, I often say RM's albums, whenever he comes out with them, he made them just for me because I connect with them on such a lyrical level, going through mental health issues and depression and self-doubt. And he speaks so much about that. And there's been so many phases of my life when he's come out with an album and it was exactly what I needed to hear. And when I go back and listen to it, it gives me all of that again. Or if I'm going through a hard time, it brings me that comfort or that reassurance again. Like Bethany was saying, it's just the wisdom of their lyrics is so incredible. It's definitely something that people should know about BTS.
Do you think that the lyrics are what make being in a music fandom different from other fandoms? Or is there anything else that makes being in a music fandom different from another fandom?
I would say lyrics are a big part of it. If we're comparing, if you're in the Harry Potter fandom or something of that sort, because it's just, you have that application to your own life. It's a message that you can take with you, where, you can take maybe a little bit of a message away from the Harry Potter series and in some way or another, but it's not something that you maybe are applying to, I don't know if that makes sense.
You don't think about it all the time in your daily life. One other thing that I wanted to say is that people often invalidate BTS ARMY as a fandom and BTS as music because of who makes up their fandom, how it's majority women, and they say their music can't be good. Nothing about us being women makes our taste in music not as good as any other person. We think about what the production is, we think about the lyrics. If anything, fangirls have always shown what great music is. Like Bethany mentioned the Beatles earlier. That was so many fangirls, Beatles mania. And now, 50 years later, they're still revered as one of the best groups of all time. Music that women love deserves to be just as revered, and it's not just the screaming girls or whatever. I also wanted to say, I think that this fandom or being a fan of K-pop fandom is not as different as being a fan of other groups. Like, to help people understand, if you're into basketball, you know all of their teams, you know all of the players on those teams, you know their stats, you know so many, information about them. That's normal if you're a big fan of that. It's just being involved in what you love at the highest level. And that's what I think is so great about any fandom and not just the BTS fandom also.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, as a Survivor fan, I could name all of the winners in a row. I could name all of the facts from the different seasons. How is that any different from being a fan of a baseball team and knowing which school all of the players went to, or knowing which city each member of BTS grew up in? I think that that's an excellent point. For some reason, just because it's mostly women, whatever we like is somehow not legitimate. But even when you think about music and all of the music fandoms, a lot of the major mainstream pop artists are mostly made up by women in the fandom. So women actually have so much economic power and so much power to shape culture. I still don't understand why we're kind of put down in that way when we're a fan of something.
Exactly. We drive culture. We totally do. And we put our money there too. It's not something that is fair. It's an observation of what's going on. And things like this, conversations like this, are what help change people's perspective. Maybe there's a big football fan listening to this podcast. They never thought about different fandoms before and our impact.
Do you think that there's an element of it also being a fan of something that is not from North America, a fan of something that is in a different language? And I'm just thinking about how the other day I was at an event and I met a content creator there, and I was asking her, what type of content do you make? She was so sweet. She had so many followers, but she was quite bashful describing what she did. And she was like, I cosplay and I talk about anime. And I was like, listen, I am a K-pop fan. You have no reason to feel embarrassed or to hold back from how much you love something. I understand what it's like to be a fan. I understand what it's like for people to sometimes be a bit judgy about the things that I'm a fan of. Do you think that that plays into the experience too?
For sure. Like, immediately people, they mentally other BTS or other K-pop because it's not something that they're used to. They didn't grow up seeing it all the time. It's not like necessarily normalized in North American culture to follow BTS like it is to even follow Taylor Swift or Beyonce or something like that. So even just like being a fan of these like mega stars on top of them being an international, like out of the North American, kind of cultural lens, I think definitely makes a difference.
It just always kind of blows my mind that not only them being from South Korea, but it's that language barrier that really seems to hold people up. And I think that's why BTS ended up coming out with English discography, because it became very obvious that that was a barrier to breaking through to a wider range of just radio play American listeners. It was that language barrier was really holding people up. So they needed the English.
Yeah, and I hope that people can get on board. I know in North America, totally normal to listen to Spanish music. So hopefully listening to Korean music and honestly, even J-pop and other Asian music, I hope that we have the capacity as a culture here to catch up, because so many people are missing out on amazing things. In terms of your life as a super fan, how do you honor your appreciation for BTS in your regular life? I know you have your podcast. Is there anything else you do?
We have our personal group of friends here in like Kansas City area that I like to have K-pop nights or like BTS nights. One of my favorite memories was for my birthday when BTS went to the American Music Awards to honor them, making it to this huge award show. They hadn't done it before. I had like all of my friends over and I didn't tell them what it was. They thought it was a birthday party and I went all out. I mean, I had helium balloons with like photo cards hanging from them. I had the Korean flag hanging up. That was my way of kind of like honoring them. It's just having like my friends over. I think that's one of my favorite things to do, is just to have a bunch of Korean food, Korean drinks, watching music videos, and just being with a bunch of friends and introducing people to BTS and K-pop. I think it's just so fun. And most of the time people end up having a really fun time with it.
Were you able to convert anyone at that party?
I think I probably did. Maybe Morgan, Kayla.
Oh, totally, Morgan. Yeah. We went to their concert in Chicago.
I'd say we also really like Hypen, and so we also have had some friends now get into Hypen because of just like parties of, okay, let's watch the music videos and eat some good food.
For me, on top of the K-pop nights that Bethany loves to host, which are amazing and so much fun, I also like have a bunch of decorations around my house that are very BTS. Like I can't go a moment without thinking about them when I'm home. I have this big tapestry on my wall that's the photo from the Persona era. Right above my head, you can't see them, but I have the 7 BTS Barbie dolls in their idol outfit. It was a 25th birthday gift from my mom. She got me all of them, and I just have them proudly on display in my living room. But anyone who comes into my house, they're going to enter the door and then see 7 BTS Barbie dolls staring at them, just like waving. I'm like, I just spread the love of BTS all around whoever comes into my home. And another way is just like how I live my life. Like I think when I'm having a bad day, it goes back to their music of just what am I going to do to motivate myself? And it might be putting on D2. It might be putting on I Love Myself Her or something like that. Of just like, let me pump myself up. Let me feel great. If you haven't incorporated BTS's music into your gym workout playlist, would definitely recommend because they have so many bops that like really, really hype you up. So especially in this time when they're all in the military, I try to live in a way that they would be proud of, that they would encourage all of their army to wear.
It's kind of nice having this time where Jin has been in the military and he's going to be back again because it's a clear defined 18 months. I remember when it was announced he was going to the military, I was so heartbroken. Now I'm so excited he's back. And I think back to how much my life has changed since Jin went to the military. What are the biggest benefits and changes to your lives you've gotten as a result of being an army?
For me, the podcast is amazing and we love to do it, but definitely my friendship with Bethany, I am always so grateful that BTS came into our lives because we, of course, were already really good friends, but just having BTS to like deepen the bond over, like when we first were getting into them, we had to hang out multiple times a week just to fangirl and like watch their music videos. When we both graduated college and we were in different parts of the country, talking about BTS and doing the podcast together is like what really kept us really good friends and kept us up in each other's lives all the time. Amongst the many other amazing friendships that we've made too through our listeners, the iconics that we got to meet in real life, and we've become really good friends with them too. I'm just always grateful for what BTS has brought me in regards to my friendship with Bethany and then the connections with other people in the fandom.
I'll have to second Kayla on that with just deepening our friendship. And I think we would have stayed friends post-college, but because of BTS, our friendship has really deepened. Something else that I just really think of when I think about what BTS has brought into my life is that initial falling in love with them. Those were some of the best moments of my life. I don't know. Like, I just felt like I was on a high the whole time. I just felt happy and good that their music just made every day better. In addition to that, I have gotten to travel to Fort Worth. I've gotten to travel to LA and just going to their concerts. That's been a whole experience. They feel like really large, monumental moments in my life. I put it up there with my wedding or, like big major life events like that. I just will never forget those memories of being at a BTS concert and just traveling there with friends or who I met while I was there, armies that I've talked to online that I finally got to meet in person. I would have never had that at all in my life. They're just such great moments where I'll just never forget them. Also, since I was traveling a lot when BTS were coming out with music, I was a travel therapist for a little bit. When I go back and listen to albums, it takes me back to that place. And it's almost like their discography has become like a little bit of a journal for me and takes me back to specific moments of my life. And I think that goes for anyone who even isn't traveling or doing something to that extent. You just are taken back to that moment in life when you were listening to that song. And it just is, I don't know, it creates this nostalgia and wonderful memories. They've brought so much joy. That's really what it comes down to, is just so much joy into my life.
So many joyful moments, so many incredible memories. Those concerts really, we always tell people if you can go to a BTS concert, you need to, but we don't want to make tickets more difficult to find. But it's just an experience at a concert that cannot be replicated with any other concert, any other musician. It's so powerful and beautiful.
I am not exaggerating at all, but being at PTD Las Vegas was one of the best times of my life. I can't even describe the joy and being worry-free and being able to be present and jump up and down and sing and not have to worry about judgment and just being around everybody else who was so happy. Like, I still remember when Silver Spoon came on, because at that time you couldn't tell if they were going to sing An Pan Man or Silver Spoon, and then it was Silver Spoon, and I was just jumping up and down and screaming. Truly one of the best moments of my life. So I totally get it.
Oh gosh, we tried not to look up the set list beforehand, which is really hard not to do. But when you get that song that you didn't expect that they were going to play, like, I mean, you're so excited and overwhelmed and just happy that it's being played.
Were there any unexpected ways that you grew or changed because you were an ARMY?
I would say one of the things that, Kayla, you've kind of been an inspiration to me, and Erika, you've talked about it, that overcoming that initial judgment of people for being passionate about something, that has been a growing process for me. I used to very much be bashful or like ashamed, or I felt like I kind of had to hide it or be a closet ARMY or whatever. And I would blame it on things like, oh, it's because I'm a professional, I'm a healthcare worker, like I can't be talking about these things. When in reality, it's just like, why am I letting that judgment get to me? And Kayla really taught me about, you just have to be passionate. You just have to be optimistic about it. And they take it how they want to. But usually if you're showing enthusiasm, usually people are like, oh, really? They end up, appreciating it too, or at least not being so negative or judgmental towards you. And so that was huge, just kind of like owning it and being like, yeah, I'm very proud to be BTS ARMY. And you can apply it to more things than just being BTS ARMY,
Yeah, you've really worked hard on that and like have had so much growth in that. I feel like for me, a lot of times looking back in my life, I would get into something and be interested in it and just stick with it for a few months or maybe like a year. And I always felt like I was somebody that really couldn't commit to like liking something long term or a hobby. And I always used to like wonder what's wrong with me that I just don't like this anymore. I loved it 6 months ago. I don't like it now. And I would just naturally move away from things and I would put them down and never come back to them. And I was always worried, especially early on, that BTS would be that way for me, that, I was really into them right when we got into them, 2017, 2018, like golden era of BTS. I was worried with all the changes with Chapter 2 or with Enlistment that maybe I wouldn't feel that connection. Maybe I wouldn't want to be as involved, or maybe I would just really fall out of it. But I never did. And so BTS really taught me I can stick with things and I'm able to stick with something and to like still get joy out of it even 6 years later. And that was really something that I really hope to learn for myself at one point in life. And I think BTS was one of those things that will continue that.
That's incredible. And I think that something else you should both be proud of is your podcast. As I said at the top of the show, when I was telling my ARMY friends in real life that I was a guest on your show, everybody had said they had already listened to your podcast and they were fans of you. So congratulations on what you built there. Did you think that you were ever going to be a host, or were you ever interested in broadcasting, or was the podcast truly just because you were such big fans of BTS?
We wanted to start the podcast because we were both big fans of podcasts at the time. And Bethany was about to start doing travel occupational therapy. And so we wanted to still have our time of hanging out and fangirling over them. We had no aspirations for the podcast at all. I think in our first episode, we were like, we just want to make a space where we can hang out and fangirl and talk about BTS because we have no one else to do it with. So if you're like that, then like maybe you'll enjoy this podcast. But we really didn't have any big dreams or like big goals with it. It was something we wanted to sit down and do. And it just became like a little passion project and hobby.
I think we kind of joked about it at the beginning of, oh, we talk about BTS so much, we could have a whole podcast about them. Like we just love talking about them to such lengths and extents that we could make a podcast. With me doing travel, one of the main concerns was, how are we going to continue to talk about BTS? And we're like, why not? Let's just do a podcast. And oh my gosh, it's just turned into way more than what we expected it to be. I mean, it deepened our friendship, but also the dedication to it too. We used to do it every week. Now we do it every other week. But I mean, I think we're going on 6 years.
240 episodes in 6 years.
I feel like our analysis of music videos and lyrics too, like I feel like our creativity process is also strengthened through the podcast. We've gotten so much from it. And of course, the connection with all of the other armies and the iconic army too.
You have made the transition from super fan to now super fans with fans of your own, the iconic armies. Was there a moment when you started to realize that you have fans? And then what do you keep in mind now as a fan yourself as you nurture this community you've built?
I was thinking about it, and I think it was probably when they asked what their name is. Because most podcasts or content creators, they might name their listeners. And we never wanted to do that, I think, the first year and a half of doing the podcast, because we just felt like we're two BTS army, just part of the fandom. We didn't feel like we deserved any ownership or claim over like a subsection of the fandom at all. But I guess there was a point where one of our listeners, Eileen, reached out and she was like, what are we calling us? Because I feel like we need an identifier. I'm meeting and I'm wanting to talk to other people that listen to the podcast, so we need a community. And so we had a little vote on it, and Eileen was actually the one that came up with the name Iconics, because at the time in the podcast, we said that word so much. There was a point where we used to bleep the word because we said it way too many times. It was just getting ridiculous. It was probably, I don't know, Bethany, maybe around like the 2-year mark or something, that we realized, oh, we have fans and they're called the Iconics. And ever since then, we felt a real responsibility, especially since we met some Iconics in person for the first time in LA when we went to the International Dance Concert there. We met other ones again when we went to Lollapalooza and we saw Hobie there. And so especially meeting Iconics in real life, in person, really made it so real for us. These are people that think about and care about what we have to say about BTS. So I think it made us take this hobby and this passion project a lot more serious. And we already took it serious, but I think we felt and we put more pressure on ourselves to just always do research, to always do our best and like be really excited about the work that we put out.
I think another big moment where I was like, oh, we definitely have listeners who are fans of the show, that it stood out for me was when our listeners were becoming friends with each other. And that was huge. I mean, we would get a lot of like really nice emails from listeners saying how much they love the podcast, how it gives them a really safe space, getting all of the really kind reviews. But then once we started hearing about people who are like, hey, I ended up meeting one of my friends through your show. We both listen to your show and we both love it so much that we ended up meeting up in like Tennessee somewhere or whatever. And I'm like, what? They lived in 2 different places. And so there's a lot of Iconics who are like have their own little friend groups now. And it's just really cool to see that the connection that they have, they found each other through our show.
Wild. Just something we really never thought would happen.
So when this episode comes out, Jin is going to be out of the military same week. If you're listening to this, he might already be out of the military. And then, as we know, Hobie's going to be out in just a few months. And then before we know it, all 7 of them are going to be out of the military. What are you most looking forward to for their return?
I'm really looking forward to the surprise of it all. I don't know what to expect from BTS, but I have always believed that BTS is just, people say like BTS paved the way. BTS, they kind of did their own thing. I just feel that with chapter 2, this has been completely different, that I'm excited to see where they go with what I'm calling chapter 3 when they all come back together. I feel like it's going to look different. I'll be curious to see if they do more like a subunit album or like a subunit concert. I don't really know what to expect with all of them having gotten to dive into their music genres that they like and what they appreciate. I'll be curious to see if albums of BTS become a bigger blend of even more genres and are more reflective of each member individually or how they contribute. I think it's just going to be something we have not seen yet before, and I'm excited for that.
I love how you put that, and I was thinking the same thing, just like the surprise of what's coming next. I think going into chapter 2 and enlistment, a lot of us were really worried what it was going to be like, feeling like we were going to be missing them or missing who BTS is as a core. I'm like so happy for a lot of us who felt like we don't feel that way. I know Bethany and I have been very much well fed with these albums, and everything that the different members have been putting out the special content like the Hope on the Street docu-series during this time, that it's really got me excited for what they're going to do and the changes that they're going to make. I think that they're going to show what a K-pop group can be in longevity, that it doesn't have to be just all 7 members performing and only making albums as a 7 group forever. I think they're going to show that they can kind of do things a little bit differently. So, like Bethany said, I'm excited for maybe sub-unit albums, or like now that they've all put out different music, are they going to tour and do like a huge concert and play solo music at this concert? That would be amazing. I'm also really looking forward to like how they've changed over this time. I think it's a big opportunity for them to step back from the limelight and to just feel more normal, more human. So I'm excited to see like what perspective they have, what's been on their mind that they're going to come back and share with us in their music.
I can't wait. I feel like it's going to be like when you go to the airport to pick someone up who you love, who you haven't seen in a long time, and there's just that overjoyed feeling when you reunite. I feel like it's going to be like that in music or content or dance or performance form. I don't know what it's going to be, but I think there's just going to be this sense of joy that we're all reunited. So I cannot wait to have them back.
Same. I can't wait to see them all together again, too. Something about seeing them together is just the best.
I feel like there's been a lot going on with their chapter 2. Like, I feel like it's been hard to keep up with the solo projects, but oh my gosh, when they are back, it's on, everyone. It is on. Kayla and Bethany, thank you so much for chatting with me today. I always love connecting with you both. Can you tell people more about where they can follow you and where they can find Stanning BTS?
Yeah, so you can listen to Stanning BTS anywhere that you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, really any podcast streaming server. We're most active on our Instagram. Stanning BTS Podcast is our handle. If you want to find us there. We do have a Twitter also under the same name, but less active there. But you can always engage with us on Instagram.
Amazing. I will make sure I link the episode where I'm on your podcast in the show notes so people can check that out, because you two did an amazing interview about how BTS and their underdog story inspired me. Thank you both so much for joining the podcast today. And Borahey.
Borahey, thank you so much for having us. This has been wonderful. Great conversation.
Those girls are just awesome. If you are an ARMY and you're not already listening to Stanning BTS, make sure you subscribe to their podcast. And I'm so grateful that Kayla and Bethany joined me on my show today. Now, I love to end each episode by answering a listener question. And a question I get often when I'm talking to ARMY in particular is, what is your favorite BTS song? So since this is a BTS episode, let me answer this one today. My favorite BTS song is Answer Love Yourself. I think this is a beautiful song, and the lyrics are all about self-love and self-compassion. To be honest, during the dark days of the pandemic, the dark lockdown days, so many times I would be laying under a weighted blanket just listening to the song and crying, and it got me through a lot of those tough pandemic days. So thank you, BTS, for releasing the song. And there are lyrics in here that I think are so beautiful, that I quote all the time, that I think about all of the time, and I want to share those with you today. My favorite lyric in the song is, "Maybe the scars from your mistakes make up your own constellation." And I love that lesson in terms of self-compassion, because it's so easy to beat yourself up about mistakes or missteps that you've made in the past, or thinking that you should have done better or known better in the past. I'm guilty of that too. But then when you realize all of these things that you maybe thought were missteps just make up the beautiful constellation of who you are, I think it's so much easier to forgive myself and to know that I'm just part of a journey. I think of this lyric all of the time. I put on this song anytime I need a pick me up. And if you want a song that can help you through maybe some challenging moments, or that can pick you up and reinforce the good mood you're in when you are having a good moment, I highly recommend you check out Answer Love Myself by BTS. So thank you so much for tuning into the podcast today. Make sure you share this episode with any ARMY you know. If you haven't already, please subscribe, rate, and review the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for being here, and I will be happy to see you next Monday.